Okay, so today we're going to discuss chords. And everyone knows that chords are something it's super important for anyone that's writing music to have some kind of understanding of what chords are, how they function. Today we're going to be discussing 3 ways that you can really enhance your chord writing. And this video is especially geared towards people who aren't very fluent in music theory. So me, as someone who is knowledgeable about certain things music theory wise and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to try to push all my music theory terminology out of the way, and I'm going to try to use kind of simple terms that are understandable, that maybe if you don't have any at all experience with music theory, you'll at least be able to follow this. So anyway, we're going to look at 3 ways to improve your chord writing. The first way is going to be through the old tried and true fashion and tradition of trial and error. A lot of people will go in and they'll kind of pencil in these chords in their DAW and they'll go note by note, up and down. I'm going to give you a couple tips and tricks to kind of narrow your sights and get your aim a little bit more precise. So you're not just going note by note. You kind of have a pattern that you can follow if you really want to sit down and write down your chords literally note by note as they go along. The second way we're going to look at is we're going to look at some of the built-in functions that our DAWs have. I'm using Ableton Live, but all DAWs have these kind of MIDI effects or MIDI functions in them. You might have to dig for your particular DAW if you're not using Ableton Live, but for this purpose, we're going to look at Ableton Live and some of the really helpful kind of MIDI effect tricks that there are in there to help us in the chord writing process. And then thirdly, we're going to look at some aftermarket VST plugins. We're going to look at some plugins. There are a ton of them out there. There are a ton of these plugins that kind of help you with the chord writing process. Specifically today, we're going to be looking at Captain Chords, which is made by the same people that do Mixed in Key. It's an amazing chord writing plugin, super helpful, and I really think that you're gonna learn a lot and find that tool to be very useful as well. So let's get right into it. Let's look over here in Ableton. In Ableton, you'll see I have a MIDI track open right here, and I'm just gonna drag operator onto it. Now in Ableton, operator is just like a very simple synth. Its initialized preset is just a single sine wave, and it's very easy on the ears. A lot of people like to write their piano chord, or their chords, with pianos, and that's kind of cool. I get kind of distracted by like the attack and sustain because I've been trained on piano and I play piano, so I hear whether or not the sustain pedal is down or not, or how hard the velocity, and so it really messes with my head. So I get too focused on that. That's why I like to use the simple kind of sine wave thing, is because you can hear every single note that's going on, but you can also kind of feel if 2 notes are dissonant or if they're kind of phasing each other just with the way the waves stack up. Anyway, you can use whatever you want. You want to use a piano, go for it. It's all you. Or if you want to use the initialized Serum preset, that's all cool. I just think this is easy and quick, and in Ableton it's easy and quick. And it's easy on the CPU. That's a really important thing. Easy on the CPU is always good. So I'm just going to make a little MIDI clip here. Command-Shift-M on Ableton. And the first step when writing any chords is choosing the key of or usually the root note of your first chord is the key of your song. So in this instance, let's go with E. So here I have a nice E note, and my project's at 150 BPM. So if you're in that tempo range, great. If not, this works in any tempo range, obviously. Cool, an E note, very easy. Okay, so now that we're getting into our first kind of method here, let me give you the key to this method. We're going to be moving in steps of 2, 5, and 7. And we're also going to be moving in steps of 12, but if you think 7 and 5 is 12. So the key numbers here are 2, 5, and 7. And what that basically means is we're not going to be going up by 1 note or up by 3 notes. We're going to either go up by 2, down by 2, up by 5, down by 5, up by 7, down by 7, up by 12, down by 12. We're just kind of narrowing the sight so you have this more defined palette of notes to choose from. And we'll see how it works here. So I'm just going to kind of noodle around with this and see what we can do. So the first thing I'm going to do right off the bat is I know, this note is a little bit high, so maybe let's try and copy and paste and move it 12 semitones down. That's shift down on the keyboard in Ableton, and now you have kind of you have the octave. You have two of the same notes playing, one in E2, which is a lower octave, and one in E3, which is a higher octave. Okay, sounds like two E's playing together. But from this lower E, let's copy and paste again and move it up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and see what that sounds like. Okay, so we're starting to get some sort of kind of harmonic vibe going on there. So from this A, let's we have this A here in the middle, right? And let's copy and paste it, and let's try and go up 2. Ooh, that's kind of like an eerie chord, right? And so we're 4 notes in, and we have something kind of working, right? We have something kind of going for us. So we're going to move on to the next step. And I'm doing these very quick and very brief just for the sake of this video, but you can get as intricate as you want, or you can leave it as simple as you want. It's just important to remember that the chord structure is kind of the backbone of your entire song. So it's what guides the melody and the listener through everything. So just keep that in mind. Now, after your first chord, you have to make a decision, right? Do you want to go up in pitch, or do you want to go down in pitch? It really doesn't matter. It's kind of if you want an ascending chord progression or a descending chord progression, if you want it to kind of, if it resolves up, if it resolves down. That's just going to be a decision you have to make as the musician, because believe it or not, you have to make decisions in your music. So I'm gonna go up. Why not? So we're gonna go from E root to an F root. So I'm going to start off exactly the same way as I did before. I'm going to put one note an octave up, and so now I'm going to have this E chord, and I'm going to have this F. So now it just sounds like 2 Fs playing. From the bottom F, let's go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and see what that sounds like. Okay, I'm not mad at it. Let's go up 5 from the bottom F. 4, 5. That's an A sharp there. Let's see if it sounds dissonant, if it works. Okay, it's kind of, I gotta make my notes a little bit longer. It's kind of cool, but it also sounds kind of funky, in the sense where it sounds like eerie, which I guess if that's what I was going for, it'd be cool. Let's try and move this down 1, 2. So now we're 3 up from the F, which is kind of rule breaking, but that's very dismal. That's very, again, by moving one note, we get a totally different kind of sound. We go from eerie to kind of sad. Now, and you can keep playing with this all day. And again, there's only 4 notes in each of these chords. You can do as many notes. I mean, you don't want to overstack them because it can get a little too busy and things can start clashing. But you can definitely do 5, 6, sometimes even 7 notes in your one chord, depending on how far you want it to span in the octave range. I'm going to show you also real quick how we already kind of saw how one note changed that F-rooted chord from an eerie thing to like a darker, dismal, more minor kind of chord. So with this initial E chord, if you remember, it's kind of low and gray and sad. I'm going to move the B up by 2. Let's just see what that does. So you go from a completely dark and dismal chord to a completely happy and open, joyful chord, right? So you have this very like bright and then kind of dark chord progression going on here. So we really are just moving notes up by 2s and 5s and 7s in those kind of steps. And we're doing it up and down, and through that we've been able to kind of create these 2 chords. This is kind of the idea of the first way of writing better chords is penciling in your chords in a calculated way. And the calculated way is by moving in steps of 2, 5, and 7. Okay, now let's look at the second way of really helping your chord writing process, and we're going to be using some of the MIDI effects in Ableton, and any DAW you're working in. Virtually all DAWs have something like this to assist with the MIDI writing process. So we're going to look at Ableton right now. In here, you're going to see under MIDI effects, we're going to take the chord menu and drop it down. And if you look in here, there's all these crazy names of all these different kinds of chords: jazz, house, film noir, all these different styles. But we're going to keep it, and you can play around with those all you want, but we're going to keep it simple. We're going to take the major chord plugin, and we're going to drop it on our operator channel, and you're going to see right here how this works. It goes before the instrument because the MIDI, it has to affect the MIDI before it hits the instrument. So in terms of signal flow, right, that's how we're doing things. And in Ableton, if you try to put a MIDI effect after a synth, it'll yell at you. So make sure you put your MIDI effects before your VSTs. So if you look here, all it's doing is, if you see this shift 1, shift 2, all these different knobs down here, if you see the +4 and the +7, it's breaking the rule, right? We talked about moving in 2 5s and 7s, but with these presets, they're kind of already set in a way where whatever root note you play, it'll play whatever is 4 up from that and whatever is 7 up from that. So it plays 3 notes here, 4 up and 7 up, and that's what it does. So if I go through, so you can definitely hear that these are obviously major structured chords. None of them sound dark. They all kind of sound whatever, but the key's floating all over the joint. I mean, the key, there's really not one key. Yes, they're all major chords and they all have the major feeling, but they're not all really in a designated key. So how can we do that? Let's say we've decided the key of our song. So the key of our song, let's say is, let's go E major, right? So if you look over here in Ableton, they have this scale menu that I dropped down here. And there's all these different kinds of scales, and you can go Mixolydian and all these crazy types of music theory stuff that you can look up, or you can just experiment with to see what the different scales are. A lot of them are just changed by one note, either up or down. It's pretty specific, but for this case, I'm going to show you how you can use either just the C major or even or the C minor scale plugin on Ableton to really snap your chords into the right scale or whatever your key of your song is in. So we're going to put the scale after the chord generator. So the chord generator is going to spit out these chords, and the scale is going to go, oh, wait, that note's not in scale, and it's going to drag it into the scale, and then it's going to hit your synthesizer. Just because the scale is called C major doesn't mean you can only use it in C major. If you see this bass knob here, you can move this bass knob, bass, B-A-S-E, not B-A-S-S. You can move this bass knob to be the key of your song. So if your song is in E major, you put it in an E. On the C major plugin, you put the bass knob at E. Now any chord you write is going to be in the E major scale. And just like that, you have your E major chords, and you can put whatever VST you want in after this, and any note that you play is going to generate a chord that's in that E major scale. All you have to do when you pencil in the MIDI is just put in the root notes that you're playing, and Ableton will do the rest. So that really is a quick way of getting a decent chord progression down using some of the built-in MIDI effects that your DAW provides. Okay, so the third way we're going to look at for improving your chord writing is through aftermarket VSTs. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, we're going to be looking at Captain Chords, which is made by the same people that do Mixed in Key, right? Mixed in Key is all about the key and harmonics that go together. So by nature, their chord plugin is very reminiscent of that, and it's super, super powerful and really useful. So in Ableton, you'll see that I have Captain Chords loaded up. And the first thing that we're going to talk about with Captain Chords is it does have its own little sound generator in here, so you can cycle through and hear the different sounds. I'm just going to keep it on the first one, which is piano strings. So let's go to the top of the Captain Chords plugins. You'll see the key, right? So we have to choose a key for our song. Right now it's G. I don't typically write too often in G. Let's do F minor because it's quick and easy, and a lot of people write in F minor, especially in dance music. Totally cool. So we have our key and our scale set. We're going to write a chord progression that's in F minor. So let's look at this progression tab. Now, you're going to see all these Roman numerals, and you're like, Nick, what is all of this? That plays back to some music theory stuff. And there's all these chord progressions, 1, 5, 4, 6, 1, 6, 4, whatever, all these different combinations. That's all very, again, music theory terminology that I'm really trying to avoid. But the cool thing about Captain Chords is it tells you next to the Roman numerals what the corresponding chord is. And so even better, if you audition these as you go through and select them, you'll get a quick little blip of each chord. Like it'll just go dot 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 dot, so you can hear each chord. So let's go through and see. All of these chord progressions, by the way, are in F minor. So I just need to go through and find one that is pleasing to my ear. I like that one. Okay, so let's just choose that, right? And automatically it's gonna throw out the chords and show you exactly how they're laid out. And if I hit the space bar, so Captain Chords has also recognized the tempo of my project, and it has automatically generated a chord progression that lies in the tempo range and is on grid, which is really, really interesting. So you can go in and you can change all of these notes around if you want to add other harmonics. But for the sake of this video, I mean, we're like, I don't know, maybe a minute in and we already have a chord progression down. So let's figure out what can we do with this chord progression through Captain Chords. So we have our chords here. And you can go into this timing section, and you can go in and change how the chord progression is timed. You can go into this rhythm section, and it'll put the MIDI in the rhythm that you choose, like different types of kind of melody lines or grooves or whatever that you want to complement with. It's all built into this plugin, and it can aid you along if you really are needing a little bit of help, and it can also really give you a kickstart if you have difficulty writing chords. We talked about the little built-in VST that they have, and it has some effects here, a reverb, and a delay and all that kind of stuff, and a filter. So it's fun to play around in, and it can give you like a little idea. But the coolest thing about this is this tab right here called plugins. And if you go, when you first open it, it's going to scan your plugins. But when I open it up, you'll see that all of my plugins that are compatible with Captain Chord show up. So I'm going to reach for X for Records Serum. And now if I hit OK, you will see Serum pop up. Captain Chords is actually running Serum in it, which is pretty interesting. And just quickly, you can hear, if I hit the spacebar, it turns off Captain Chords' little sound generator, and we'll use Serum as the main instrument. Let's do one step further. Let's say you really want to do a bunch of stuff with Serum and you want it on a separate channel. Super easy. We're gonna Command-Shift-T in Ableton, make a new MIDI track. And if you look over here on this MIDI track, it has the input selection. We're gonna choose Captain Chords, and we want it before any sort, we don't have any effects, but we want it before, and we don't want any effects dealing with it. So we're not gonna do the pre-effects or post-effects. We're just gonna choose Captain Chords on both of them. And then in Captain Chords, we're gonna go to VST output. So now you're telling Captain Chords, hey, I'm sending your MIDI to something else, right? All I have to do is arm the track. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna take our VST that we used before, X for Records Serum. So on this MIDI track now, I just have Serum, and I'm telling it to take the MIDI that Captain Chords is putting out and run it through Serum. So if I hit the space bar now, you'll hear Serum playing on a different channel. And there we go. Now you're gonna be like, Nick, well, what can I do with that? Let me show you. So let's just do a little sound design here. We'll bring up the unison we'll bring up the unison. We'll give it a little juicy. Great. That sounds cool. We have a nice like saw stack chords. You can add a bass in there to thicken them up, but that's a decent start, right? And so let's say you really want to start to manipulate the MIDI. It's really easy. All you have to do is hit the record button, make sure the track is armed, and there you go. Watch. And just like that, you went from having nothing to a key and a scale that your song is in. Now you have a 4-chord chord progression in its own channel, in its own VST channel, that you can now add all your other post-processing effects on and everything. You can go into this MIDI clip and you can move these notes around. I mean, now it really is up to you, but you have utilized Captain Chords to generate a chord progression in just a few minutes, something that maybe you had difficulty with prior to. But through the tools that we've looked at, you've been able to kind of navigate and find which tools you have in your tool belt and how you can use them to generate this kind of a chord progression. So that's it. Those are the 3 ways you can really enhance your chord writing, especially if you're having difficulty with music theory. All of these tools are available online. They're available in your DAWs. You can look up Captain Chords. You can look up Serum if you don't have. I mean, all that kind of stuff. You want to get a good arsenal of these tools in your belt, because when you're writing and you need to reach for something, if you're having difficulty, you want to know what you're reaching for and you want to make sure it's the right tool. I really, really, really encourage you to deploy some of these tactics and deploy some of these ideas in your writing process. Even if you are keen with music theory and that kind of stuff, sometimes these little shortcuts or these little tools can expedite your workflow, and that's something that really streamline everything you're doing. That's something that we always strive for as musicians, is to really spend the most time creating and the less time messing around with stuff. We want to be on the train of creation. So I really hope that you are able to take these tools and utilize them and write some better chords.